Hello, everyone. Welcome to the NAAC Conversation, a monthly series brought to you by the NAAC Rules Education Committee, talking with compliance professionals about topics impacting our industry. My name is Ted Seilheimer from the University of Houston, and after taking a summer break with these videos, we wanted to engage here in the conversation that we've all been having in our offices and daily lives about social justice, and specifically looking at it from an athletics and a compliance view. Here with me today are Natasha Oakes, newly elected MOA board member and the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Compliance at North Texas. We have Jody Sykes, the Senior Associate Athletic Director and Chief Compliance Officer at Oregon, and Ike Ukaegbu, the Senior Associate Athletics Director for Compliance at TCU. So welcome. Thank you all for joining me.
Hi, Ted. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having.
Well, I just want to start out with a question for the group and kind of just big picture topics. How have social justice initiatives and the Black Lives Matter movement impacted your department, and specifically the way that you work in your office? Have there been any changes to your approach with your staff, others in the department, or to any of your policies and procedures?
Well, I can start off. I would say for us at the University of North Texas, as far as how I operate, I don't know if there's been much change as far as how I operate. Recognizing that representation is important. I try to be engaged with our student athletes, our staff, so that they see, especially in looking at our department, we don't have a lot of ethnic minorities in a senior management level. I do sit on executive teams, so that also is, allows them to see representation from that standpoint. I do think that it is very early in the awakening of our industry to take steps to intentionally focus on this matter. Obviously, we've heard of these issues and know, as an ethnic minority female, the importance of it. I think this is where our industry as a whole is starting to really take steps to say, I recognize, yes, Black Lives Matter, and it's not just a movement. And so I believe that we're going to see a lot come from this. You saw where Lead One Association announced that there's a working group that was put together to address some of these areas. I'm on one of the subcommittees. So I think we're still very early on in those stages as far as what people are doing. So that's why I say we haven't done very much as far as a shift. We have some initiatives that we've put together, but we're still in the process of organizing a lot of our efforts.
Got it.
Yeah, I would say, student athletes now have the ability to use their voice. They've always had a voice, but they're now exercising that voice. Yeah. They're now understanding the platform that they have and really using it. They're banding together to speak out about, social justice causes such as systemic racism, overall racism, police brutality, other forms of oppression against historically, disadvantaged and marginalized groups. And it's really eye-opening. It's really exciting to see them use that voice and speak up about these issues that are very important to them. As compliance administrators, we're used to a coach or a director of ops or somebody from a coaching staff approaching us saying, hey, my team is going to do this community service event or this promotional activity, and doing it on behalf of the team, on behalf of all the student athletes, right? That's what happens. So we make sure nobody's missing class, and we make sure that 12-5's met, all the different bylaws are met and all that stuff. But now we're seeing student athletes approach us individually or approach us as groups of student athletes for many different causes. Yes, they've heard us talk to them, during compliance meetings, beginning of the year compliance meetings, end of semester compliance meetings, send out emails to them, newsletters, all that stuff. And those meetings are long, so they may not remember everything. So now, with them coming up with these different initiatives and causes, they know, hey, I got to go to compliance and make sure that before I do this, I remember during a meeting, they said something about charitable causes or community or going out into the community and fundraising and who it can benefit and things like that, right? So they realize they got to come to compliance and make sure that before they do these initiatives, whether it's a march, whether it's a protest, whether it's, getting the whole department or all their teammates or the other teams in the department to register to vote, they want to make sure that everything is within NCAA rules, within Department of Athletics rules, within institutional rules. So it is pretty cool to have them approach us as compliance administrators, individually or with some of their teammates, and see how, engaged they are about these initiatives and want to talk through all the logistics before they go and carry them out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I've really enjoyed that piece of the conversation this summer as well. We've had several of our student athletes get involved with some different causes, and I also think though that the staff here at Oregon has taken a responsibility for some of these initiatives because the University of Oregon as a whole and the state of Oregon and the Eugene Springfield community are not an extremely diverse community, and so this has been a challenge for us to do better and to look at that and how we can help our student athletes be represented, how we can help our staff find a home here and be retained and want to stay here. Many of you know or have seen, we started an initiative back in 2016-17 called Be Oregon. And it was an initiative to voice and support a more inclusive community and encourage people to just be their authentic self. And so we have actually taken that this summer and made a branch off of that to do some inclusion education and to use that Be Oregon initiative to bring more attention to some of these social justice initiatives and try to make things better and educate and do different things. So I'm excited to see what we continue to do with that and excited to work with colleagues across the nation and across the country to make things better. And we want to collaborate in groups like this with other compliance professionals and find ways to make things just more tolerant and try to spread the good and get into good trouble, as John Lewis said, so that we make a difference.
Right.
And I feel like Ike's point about the student athletes and and Natasha's point about things that are going to be happening on a bigger level are ways that we can do that.
Excellent. I think kind of building off of that reminds me of something that Natasha and I talked about prior to this about kind of the inclusivity, but also representation. Both you're talking about with the Be Oregon initiative, but I'm thinking about it both at the macro level in terms of representation, whether it's on committees and senior leadership positions, but also thinking about representation, inclusivity in what we're doing within our own offices in terms of hiring practices and making sure that we're reaching out to folks. Is there anything that you guys have seen or heard of in terms of directives about what could be done to drive those inclusivity efforts again at the bigger national level or within our own campuses?
Yeah, in athletics, and we're all guilty of this, everybody in compliance, everybody in college athletics, when we want to hire somebody, sometimes we call our buddy, and even though we are going to put out a search and interview folks, you have people in mind who you're really interested in, you want to learn more about, or you want to offer the position to, and that's just part of athletics. It's about networking, it's about who you know. We all know that, but I think that with what's going on right now, it's important more than ever to make sure that when we are hiring for positions, when we are hiring for committees or placements for committees, that we do make sure that we are getting as diverse of a candidate pool as we possibly can. Things aren't totally ever going to change when it comes to how we operate in athletics. We will still contact people who we know when an opportunity opens up, or call our mentors to see who they know and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But, putting together diverse search committees and diverse pools, of candidates is more important than ever moving forward than it's ever been.
Yeah, I agree. And while, yes, we're still going to keep up that practice of reaching out in our network. I think we all have to take an accountability and assess what our network looks like. And if our network looks like everyone that looks like us, then are we really championing and embracing the idea of diversity and welcoming diverse thought? You know, I consider the memberships that I have. I'm in MOA, I'm a part of Women Leaders. So when we have job opportunities, whether it's in my unit or across in the department over in marketing, I'm putting those job opportunities in the job board for Women Leaders, on any groups that I'm on, whether it's a group me or on Facebook or in MOA. And I know a lot of people may not understand, especially with MOA, you can post a job through MOA if you're a member. And in order to be a member, it's only $125 for an individual membership. So when you consider something like that, if you're wanting to ensure that you have diverse representation, why not seek out an organization like that to ensure that you're getting your message out to a broad-based people? Yes, we post on the D1 ticker, but what are we doing to be intentional about ensuring that we have a diverse set of candidates in the pool?
Yeah, Natasha, you hit it right on the nail there. You know, we have to be intentional. And we have looked at our human resources postings and where jobs are being posted, not just for coaches, but for staff and other opportunities, and not just within athletics, but within the university as a whole. And where are we posting that? And are we doing a good job of soliciting people to apply for our jobs that are diverse in their backgrounds? And that can mean a variety of things in terms of diversity. But if your candidate pool always looks like every candidate pool for every job you post, then you need to work harder. And you need to do more to diversify that pool. And hopefully then ultimately that takes your diversity in your staff or your diversity in your coaching pool or whatever to another level.
Absolutely, Jody. And really, you know, this argument of they're not out there, that's a farce.
Agreed.
People are out there. And so it's up to all of us to be intentional. If we say that it's important to us, then it's not just lip service that we can offer anymore, because people are watching. And, and we as an association, as an industry, we're going to be held accountable. And so the more things that we can do to show that our actions are matching the words coming out of our mouth, the better.
Walk the walk, talk the talk, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, somewhat shifting gears, I'm going back to something that Ike was talking about earlier about the student athletes walking through the door and asking those questions about what they're looking to do from a very practical consideration. What are some of those compliance related issues that we're seeing and trying to answer when it comes to supporting and engaging student athlete activism on campus or in the community?
Now, when they ask questions, or when things come to our table, come to the table, I want to make sure that I'm thinking about how we can make things more inclusive for the student athlete. And some of these rules, some of the NCAA rules and some of the interpretations that we provide to student athletes, I don't want to say for the first time, but more than ever now, I'm thinking about the impact, the disparate impact that there is on the student athlete, on their community, on, you know, disadvantaged communities, marginalized communities. So I can see myself in the future more than I ever have when I answer questions for coaches and staff and student athletes, making sure that I'm thinking about whether there's discriminatory aspects of that decision. And if there is, how can I mitigate that? How can I get some interpretive flexibility from our conference, from the NCAA, you know, whether it's the waivers, so that we can make things more inclusive. Mm-hmm. But in the past, for the most part, it was just the rules are the rules. But now with this environment, with the fact that these social justice causes are at the forefront of our heads, our minds, and of the student athletes, when they have questions and we can't get there, you know, if not getting there also means that they're going to be at a disadvantage. And, you know, if there's anything that we can do to help that cause, to get some flexibility, then we're going to bring it up to the conference or to the NCAA, especially in this environment more than ever.
Right.
I think that it's a different lens, right? I agree with you, Ike. We have looked at things differently when a student has come to us and wants to express their First Amendment rights, and we've looked at that in a different way, and maybe something that we're like, well, you know, maybe that's not good for this, or maybe that's your brand that, or, you know, all these kinds of like hemming and hawing, and you're like, no, stop. There's a different look at this. There is a different perspective, a different approach to this. And you know, right on the point. I think that we need to look at legislation and the bylaws and see which of these bylaws are having a disparate impact on our student athletes who are maybe from a lower socioeconomic status, or whose family has, you know, experienced. We have some flexibility with hardship, but maybe not enough, right? Whether that's the hurricanes that hit, or you know, or rioting and looting that damaged the family business, or something like that. You know, those are areas that I think we look at things from a different lens, and that First Amendment lens, it has to be a part of that in my thought process, because we have to let them have a voice, and we have to provide education for that voice, and education for the activities that they can do and want to do, so that they still can step out on the field or the court of play.
Yeah, definitely. People are probably more than ever willing to have the conversation now. I think about NCAA rules that could be potentially could be maybe discriminatory against student athletes. And I can't think of any that come to my head right now, but I do remember, you know, just doing some past research in the 80s when it comes to initial eligibility, putting certain initial eligibility standards and the impact that it had, the negative impact that it had on minority student athletes and the lost opportunities for minority student athletes. You know, I wasn't doing compliance back then, but I remember reading about some of that stuff and the impact that it did have. So we can absolutely, you know, look at some of the rules and look at some of the opportunities for student athletes and make sure that some of the rules that exist right now aren't leading to some type of disadvantage for some of our marginalized groups.
And obviously being in line with universities and what the NCAA is looking at, SAT and ACT scores as a part of admissions or eligibility decisions. And it's not just in the rules themselves, but in the enforcement. You know, as we're having to enforce it on our campus, or going to the next level and engaging the NCAA, making sure that, again, the perspective that is being given to the situations that people are in are being understood through a more inclusive and understanding lens than just what the rules are saying yes or no to at the time.
When you think about our legislative process, and we ask the question of budget impact, we ask the question of, is this going to put an institution at a competitive advantage or disadvantage? You know, now to Jody's point, we have a whole different lens that we honestly should have been weighing through from the very beginning, right? So when you think about a group like MOIC and proposed legislation comes up, this now gives them a platform, and CWA gives them a platform to also provide insight on, well, wait a minute, how could this potentially impact this segment of our student population? Never before have we really been challenged and called to the carpet to think about how proposed legislation, how our current legislation may unnecessarily and unintended impact a certain segment of our population. I think about, even for example, with international students, we've got Southern Hemisphere rules that may put them at a disadvantage in the recruitment process based on how some of our recruiting rules are listed, or you know, financial aid legislation. We're getting there as far as providing some more flexibility, especially when students have a need. But if a student athlete is being detrimentally impacted and can't receive certain aid that general students have access to because of their student athlete status, are we really okay with that? And so I think that it's going to cause us to really think about that, especially when you consider things like the rising debt. So I really think that our industry is at a pivot point to really do some substantive change that can create a better experience for our student athletes.
Hey, Natasha, that's a good point with the legislative process. You know, when we review proposals each legislative cycle, and we're reading about the intent and you know the sponsor and all that, and you know on LSDBI, for example, this is we're all compliance folks here, so we can talk a little compliance, right? On the actual proposal, you know, at the bottom, we got the rationale, you got the estimated budget impact. Why can't we have something like the impact on student athlete equity or inclusivity or that type of thing?
Or even
Since
have
we're all
the
thinking that
MOIC
way.
review it, right? Even have MOA or the MOIC have, you know, on the ones that affect the student athlete experience, the SEAC gets to have an opinion, right? They get men's basketball, women's basketball oversight gets to have a statement in there. So why not include statements from groups of folks that should be looking at these and providing advice?
Correct.